File API is a new API for going ahead and allowing user to upload a file to the server. Web storage reminds me of cookies, but it allows you to save data on the client side, either persistent or just session-based data. It's all done through like a property bag or a dictionary object where it's name-value pairs, and you can choose to save as much information as you want. If you choose persistent storage, you're not limited to like you are in cookies. Either way, anytime you store anything on the client, we know that that's not fully secured. Anybody can access any data stored on the client side. Still, it's another mechanism that's available to us instead of always dumping things into cookies. Cookies are still there, mind you. This is just another opportunity. Offline applications actually allow your applications to run offline. There's a special manifest file that you'll fill out on your site, and it'll state the name of the files that can run safely offline and which ones must be connected to on the server and run online. Like, for example, a login page, you always need to connect to the server to access that. But maybe there's other pages in your site that you don't mind if the browser caches it over there and they just use that instead. And maybe they're using local storage. Offline applications allow a user who might actually have to run the application but can't connect to the internet. And your application will continue to run fine so long as the browser has cached it. History API, of course, can work with the back button, and that's especially important within Ajax. And then we have drag and drop, something that Microsoft actually created in IE5 way back in the day, where you could actually drag and drop an item. And they were like spearheading a whole new technology back then because they were the only browser that supported it. Well, since then, the other browser vendors went ahead and added that functionality to their browsers. And here we are in IE9, and Microsoft has basically dropped the drag and drop, and they have to go ahead and re-add that in again. So the irony is they created it, but then they kind of let it fall off the earth in their IE9 browser, and they got to bring it back. But all the other browsers now support it, which is funny. Geolocation is all about an application being able to determine where the user currently is on the planet. Mind you, it's very important, but every time this runs on any website, it has to prompt the user and ask them if it's okay if the web application can ask the user, hey, can I find out where your current location on the planet is? It's a huge privacy concern. So we have to make sure that it's prompting in the browser about that. And every geolocation app I've seen so far does an excellent job of prompting that. It's interesting to see how the different browsers handle that as well, if they support that feature. Finally, you probably recognize that last object listed there. That's a good old-fashioned XHR object we've been using all along with Ajax programming. You see, the thing is, he was never actually part of the standard. So they're kind of just saying, oh yeah, him too. Okay, we're putting him in part of the HTML5 standards too. We got the XHR, object. Yeah, he's part of it too. Don't worry about it. As far as our new media tags, audio, video, and canvas are the new HTML5 tags that are available. Audio and video I'll go through shortly. SVG, which is scalable vector graphics, is not necessarily new with HTML5, and it's actually been around for quite a while and supported by a lot of the other browsers. Only now in HTML or in IE9 is Microsoft Internet Explorer finally recognizing it. Before then, you had to use a plugin. The canvas object, though, is truly HTML5. Where we could go ahead and write our own custom JavaScript to do whatever kind of drawing we want. We can even have it load images, or we can do sprites, where you're doing little portions of one image to have it appear. You can even do animations. There's all kinds of cool things you can do with Canvas. The Canvas supports both two-dimensional and three-dimensional graphics. Although, finding a browser that supports three-dimensional graphics is rare. There's only a couple of them out there that do that right now. I mean, as far as three-dimensional graphics, that's using WebGL, and that is a higher edge technology, but it's amazing what kind of graphics can be done in WebGL. Ultimately, the Canvas is threatening the end of life to Adobe Flash, and of course, Microsoft's answer to Flash, which was Microsoft Silverlight. If we can get all the user agents out there, in other words, all the browsers, to recognize and use the Canvas tag, then things are going to shift dramatically from Flash world over to the Canvas world. Facebook just recently asked Zynga to convert all their games from Flash over to Canvas with HTML5. That was just in the news. That's just a sign of the times that we're making the shift from Adobe Flash over to HTML5. Apple doesn't even support Flash now on their latest iPhone, or on their iPad. They prefer that everybody start using HTML5 or some of the other APIs. So this is a sign of the times. Adobe, originally, I remember a couple of years ago, there was an email from the president saying he wasn't threatened at all by HTML5. He said people are just going to continue with Adobe Flash. And of course, he wasn't right about that. But at the same time, Adobe has embraced HTML5, and they've actually come out with some tools. They've got excellent articles on their site. They've done a lot with HTML5, and their tools now can be used with not only Canvas, but also with SVG as well. Their tools can help create that. The biggest thing, or the biggest problem we have now as actual developers is finding those tools that can work with Canvas or SVG. When we talk about Web Forms 2.0, one of the things that was included in HTML5 is new input types. Like we're always used to seeing the input tags for input type equal button, input type equal text, input type equal hidden. Well, what about all the other input types? Opera really embraced this, and today, to be honest, their browser is the only one that really supports most of these. But they actually created several different input types. For example, there's a type equal TEL for telephone. And what's nice about using some of these new ones is the hope is that if you bring it up in your phone and you see an input type equal telephone, and you're supposed to enter a phone number, it'll actually bring up the dialer on your smartphone, and you can punch it in that way. Or if it's type equals email, it'll actually go ahead and bring up the keyboard on your smartphone or on your tablet, and that keyboard will be designed for an email or web address with a .com button, for example, and an @ button. That's what the hopes are with these new input types. Another one of the input types is color and number. Like the color one, for example, the color one can actually bring up a full-blown color dialog box with all kinds of different colors, and the user can actually create a custom color. Only Opera is supporting that right now, but trust me, the other ones will as well, as they take on more features. Client-side validation has also been added. Whereas with a simple add of a simple little attribute to any of the tags, like let's say you have an input type equals text, then you'll throw one extra attribute in there, required. And that'll require the user to actually enter some data in there before it can actually be submitted to the server. So there's a lot of really cool things they did with the input type in HTML5. CSS3, of course, had to be updated with HTML5. If you think about it, with HTML5, it's got new tags, so wouldn't CSS have to be able to recognize those? Well, exactly. Plus, HTML5 with the new tags have a whole new way of handling outlines. Currently, we have our H1 through H6 for defining the outline of our entire document. But in HTML5, we have a new way of defining outlines. New outlines, for example, that can be based on the new tags that I'm about to show you, where you can go several levels deep, well below the top 6 like we're used to working with. And then based on those levels, you can address any certain section, whether it be the ancestors or descendants, with your CSS3 tags, changing the style of them. So CSS3 really did have to be upgraded with HTML5, and recognize some of the new tags, as well as dealing with deeply nested outlining that's available. So what really is supporting HTML5? This is a great question. So what user agents today, what web browsers are supporting the features of HTML5 and CSS3? Well, some browsers barely support any features. Unfortunately, especially if it's an older browser, there's very little that's supported at all, and that's a bummer. Whereas some of the newer browsers, like Google Chrome or Maxthon or Opera, they do a much better job of supporting it, as well as Apple Safari. The changes, by the way, can occur almost weekly. The changes can almost occur weekly because every time there's a new version of a browser, it might have a little bit more HTML5 support. So it's nice to see or monitor how often these things change. One thing to keep in mind, and that's my bullet point down at the bottom here, guys, is it's very important how we move to the HTML5 world. It's much easier to take an existing HTML4 page or an entire site and upgrade it slowly to HTML5, adding in some bells and whistles so that the site will look cool in some of the newer browsers, but we must maintain and test that our websites still look completely functional and useful to those people with the lowest common denominator browsers. Always consider upgrading your site slowly to some of the newer features while testing it in the old ones. Don't take a brand new site written strictly in HTML5 and try to convert it back to HTML4. That's going to take you 10 times longer. It's that much more effort to try to make it work in those older browsers. So we want to make sure our sites degrade gracefully. Like, let's say we want to use CSS3's rounded corners feature. If the corners aren't rounded when it is sent to the browser, the world isn't going to spin off its axis. Everything's going to be fine. It really depends on what you want to add to your pages. You want some cool new things, but they shouldn't be absolutely required.